But we had one more on the card, 3 hours and 28 minutes into the pay-per-view, 4 hours and 28 minutes for the people in the building. They rang the bell for Bryan Danielson against Okada, our main event of the evening. And I wrote, what else can they do? We've seen everything possible that can be done to a human body. Danielson's so good at mat wrestling. He's very smooth. Okada looks in good shape, like he's not crippled yet. He may be the one. And they started slow on this because they had to after 4.5 hours of this. But then when they start slow, within a couple of minutes, they're on the floor and they're bouncing around, off the barricade, and they're out there for a while, and Danielson's working on Okada's arm, and we're seeing some nice wrestling then. But I'm yawning because we've seen 5 hours of people being thrown into a wood chipper for no apparent reason. And then suddenly, a guy's selling a headlock. And this wasn't Danielson versus MJF. There was no match on this program on Forbidden Door as good as either of the 6-man or the 8-man tags we've seen the last 2 Saturday nights on Collision. For free. Was there? Was there one match on this card that was as good as the 6-man on the debut or the 8-man last week of Collision?
Well, I think a lot of fans would argue probably some of the main event matches here were.
I'm not asking what anybody would argue. I'm saying, was there legitimately one with his guys as professional that made as much sense, that didn't insult anybody's intelligence, that was up and down and exciting and built to a fucking climactic finish and didn't wear out its welcome as there was either one of those 2 matches on this card?
I think those matches were laid out well, and it makes more sense, and it's kind of the wrestling I like, but I don't think it's a fair comparison between those matches and Okada.
No, it's not a fair comparison, because those matches were good and these weren't.
See, I think these matches, you don't like them, but I wouldn't say they weren't good matches.
Well, Danielson and Okada did the best they could at this point in the night, and to be honest with you, if this had come, maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes into a show instead of 4.5, I'd have probably liked it better. But nevertheless, I don't know if I'd want cheeseburgers at this point anymore, much less another wrestling match.
Oh, you would? Cheeseburgers? Come on.
They were back on the floor. They went over the rail into the crowd. Now they were back in the ring with a wrist lock. Now they traded the forearms, but they were laying their forearms in better. See, that's the thing. Danielson and Okada did a lot of stuff that we had seen earlier in the night much better than the other people did it, but we'd already seen it. So even if you've heard the joke and somebody else that's a better joke teller tells it next, it still doesn't land as good because you know what's coming. Okada's got a great drop kick. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think they should have, considering the audience that is there for this show, how rabid they were, and how many people they had, including people that weren't even on the show, looking at how things have been done the last few years, should they have made this a 2-night event?
Oh, good Lord. No, they should have fucking taken 5 matches off this goddamn card and kept it manageable and probably put Kenny and Willie on last, because who's going to follow a double juice 40 minutes stabbing people with screwdrivers? But that's the only way this could. The matches wouldn't have been any better, but they would have seemed better because we wouldn't have seen so much other shit.
Hey, real quick before we get back to your match review here, what do you think about the placement of the matches? The fact that this was last, not Omega versus Ospreay.
I would have to think that Tony either was asked by New Japan, put Okada on last, or Tony, out of respect for Bryan Danielson, wanted to put him on last. That would be the only 2 reasons. Because when you look at what was going to be done in the matches, and you didn't have a world title to goddamn worry about, why would you not put the double juice 40-minute screwdriver stabbing heat angle at the end on last? Anyway, back to the match. Okada gave Danielson a tombstone pile driver on the ramp. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a guy that had to retire at one point from the wrestling industry because of concussions and blah, blah, blah. He gets a tombstone pile driver on the entrance ramp. I wrote, if he gets up, I quit. Well, he didn't get up. Okada picked him up and rolled him into the ring and didn't go for a cover. He went to the top and elbow dropped him. And apparently, at that point, when he dropped the elbow on him off the top rope, he broke Danielson's arm, landing on his fucking arm. And how the... So then he tried to pick Danielson up, and Danielson is limp. So the referee calls for the doctor, and everything comes to a halt, and the doctor comes in and checks Bryan, and I'm sure Bryan was saying, well, I think I can finish this, or whatever. The doctor gets out, nothing happened. Then they started fighting on their knees, and then they got back into the match. But again, when the referee can't back one contestant up and just call the doctor in to check somebody, wouldn't that be the same thing as going, you can't continue, ring the bell?
I mean, if that's not a ref stoppage, what is?
It's a referee stoppage. There's never been a case in wrestling, either a work or a shoot, where if a guy was hurt for a work or a shoot, you could stop the match, have a doctor come in, check him out, and then start it again. That's another modern thing. Anyway, so point is, now poor Danielson is selling his right arm, and he's doing a great job of it because it's really fucked up. And when I saw him selling it, we've heard about it afterwards. But when I saw him selling it at first, I had to go back and say, wait a minute, what the fuck? Because that was too good of a selling. And yes, he landed on it off the elbow off the top rope. And now I guess they've come out and confirmed that. And then, Danielson's in control for a while. And then great, all props to him for being able to put this performance in with whether it's not broken like it's flopping around, but crack, fracture, whatever the case. Then I started to say Obama. Okada, I wish Obama would make a big comeback, save us again. Okada made a big comeback and hit the Rainmaker. Is the Rainmaker like number 18 on the list of most impressive clotheslines in this company?
I don't think it's as bad as you do. You just haven't seen it.
Everybody else is cutting fucking flips and all. Anyway, so they get the back and forth going. And then Danielson gets the label lock, the crossface, and he has to fight for it because the bad right arm, and he can't. But finally, he locks in the label lock and holds it. And I put the watch on this for 45 seconds with both of them immobile in the ring in the hold. Then Danielson modifies it by bending Okada's left arm back. They haven't moved anywhere. They're in the same place, and he held that for about 25 seconds. Then he reached down and cross-faced him a couple of times while they were in the same position, and then bent his arm back for about 10 more seconds, and Okada tapped out. And basically, what I'm saying is they were immobile in the same place in a hold or variation of a hold for a minute and a half before the guy taps out, which is the opposite of what we've been talking about, building a big slam bang finish with the people on the edge of their seat up and up. Instead, it's just stationary hold for a minute and a half. Okay, I'll tap. There's a reason why shoots are often boring. And unfortunately, now that everybody's been influenced by the UFC and MMA, they haven't taken the good parts of UFC and MMA, the exciting shit and blah, blah, blah. You don't want shoots that look like works. You want works that look like shoots. They're doing a shoot finish here, and a lot of stuff they did look like a work in the match. You want to have your match look like a shoot and build to an exciting finish that nobody called bullshit on. You don't want your match that had a lot of bullshit in it then suddenly look like a shoot at the finish. So you want shoots that look like works. You don't want shoots that look like works. You want works that look like shoots. I'm sorry, the finish was drab as fuck. They were just there. Are you there?
I am here and you are there, and I am me and you are he.
And we are all together on this, aren't we? Was that a flat fucking finish?
The walrus was Bryce. No. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as big into tap outs as everyone else. I know it's a big thing because of MMA and UFC.
And plus, you couldn't see it because he was so tied up, he had to tap Bryan's fucking shoulder behind his back with his fingers, and they're in a 14,000 seat building.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of finish that Bryan Danielson likes for Bryan Danielson matches, is the way I would think of it.
Well, anyway.
What do you think about them going with that finish, knowing that it was going to come out right away after the show that he had one arm? Does that make Okada look worse? Does that make Danielson look better? How do you see that? Well,
they didn't know ahead of time he was going to come out with one arm, and I fuck Okada. He's the one that broke his fucking arms. I have very little sympathy for Okada, how he looked, and he's going home anyway. And Danielson's still here, but now he won't be wrestling for another couple months if that's the injury that they suspect that he really has. So
he hasn't been wrestling much anyway. He's been on commentary for the Blackpool Combat Club matches.
But you know what? You know what's in 2 months? Wembley Stadium. Boy, howdy, it might have been nice to have him in the build-up for that. Will he be ready? Will it be a photo finish? This match that meant nothing in the overall scheme of things basically cost him 2 months or however long of Bryan Danielson.
Hey, Bob Orton could do it. Why couldn't Bryan Danielson?
Well, but, and then, yeah, and he's over 40 now. And how many other injuries do you want him to work through until something finally gets him again?
You see, that's the thing I worry about. I said it to you before Punk came back, and I think Punk's looked really good so far. Again, he's been in multi-man matches, but I really like the Kojima match. Whether it's Punk or Danielson, Samoa Joe, any of these guys from that era of independent wrestling who then got onto the main stage, the amount of damage they've done to their body and their age, I always fear that they're going to break down with a lot of stuff. And, you know, again, when you start having injuries like this, I don't know how much of the injury, I mean, I was curious what your thought is. How much of it was Danielson's fault for where his arm was?
Well, it was attached to his fucking body.
It wasn't, but it was kind of, I don't know. When I went back and watched it a second time, was it too far away from his body? Was there any way for Okada to hit that?
The way that it looked to me, he was next to, Okada came with an odd angled elbow drop to begin with, is what I thought. And I think the arm was pretty much next to his body, but I mean, again, all the Japanese guys were trying to come off the top rope and having trouble with it. And even if there was something to Kevin Kelly's explanation, well, they're different turnbuckles than they're used to, then don't fucking do it. But between the guys that looked so broke down, they were not jumping off the top, but falling off the top, and this guy breaking Danielson's arm off the top, I would have declared a moratorium on the Japanese wrestlers going to the top in that particular ring.
Well, we'll see what happens next year. Forbidden Door 2024. Live from anywhere other than Chicago.